very much. So it's a real pleasure to introduce the first session that we will have today. As mentioned just before, we are working at ERSC and we define three priorities. And the first that we will discuss together is about carbon removal. With the proposal to certify carbon removals, the European Union aims at developing rules to monitor, report, and verify the authenticity of these removals. This roundtable will discuss about the contribution of the Earth observation into the carbon removals. It will be moderated by Fabio Volpe, chair of the ERSC board, and director of the ERSC board, and chair of the ERSC carbon farming monitoring working group. Is at EGOS. And the panelists will introduce Simon Kay, deputy head of Unit Low Carbon Solution, DG Climate Action, European Commission. Patrick Worth, president of the International Union of Agroforestry and vice president of the European Agroforestry Federation, EURAF. And Andreas Steinhorst, secretary general of the European Cooperation for Accreditation. And Patrick Paganini, senior policy advisory. So, yes, thank you. Fabio, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Good morning, everybody. Let me introduce this panel. This first panel for this conference is dedicated to the achieving carbon removal target. As you know, for year 2050, Europe has set a clear statement, a clear goal to be carbon neutral, climate neutral. And this requires that two main actions related to CO2 and green gases emissions. From one side, the drastic reduction of emissions of CO2 and green gases, but also it's important to take action for capture from the atmosphere the carbon. This is the goal of the proposal for regulation that has been is under discussion today. We, as let me say, Earth observation industry, we believe that information extracted from Earth observation can properly support the certification that is requested by the framework for the certification of the carbon removal. And we see this as an opportunity for the industries, let me say business opportunities, but also a contribution, of course, to the wellness of the world, not only of Europe. But it's not only an opportunity, but it's a challenge, because what we have to do as Earth observation industry is to be sure and to propose data that can be verified and can be accepted by the bodies that will be in charge of certifying the removal. So our challenge is to understand the best way for extract information for Earth observation data and how to vehicle this information and how to make this information accepted and embedded inside the regulation. In terms, like Agnes was saying before, something that is already inside the regulation, something that is familiar with the people know that on the data, you can really trust on the data and they can be used for certifying the removal. Today we have panelists that can help us to have a clear view on the certification, on the proposal, on the regulation, on the certification aspects, but also panelists that will clarify and will give their opinion about which should be the impact on the subject that we have to carry out the action for carbon removal. That is the community of the agroforestry and of agriculture. So let me introduce the panelists. I see Simon here. You can come. And the other two, Andrea. Okay. Here's Patrick, and the other Patrick. Online, both of them are online. Perfect. Okay. So the goal today is to assess at the end which is the contribution of Earth observation, information set of Earth observation support to the certification of carbon removal. And the other goal, as I said, is to understand how to vehicle this information to the bodies that will have to certify this removal. So I would like to start, first of all, with the introduction of each of the panelists. Good morning, Patrick. Good morning, Andreas. So I would like to have a 1 minute brief introduction for yourself about your organization and about your involvement in achieving carbon removal. Let's start from Simon.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Simon Kay from DG Climate Action. So very much part of the Green Deal, and very indeed pleased to be here today talking online and also in front of everybody here. So we're working directly in our group with the land element of the Green Deal. So the pillar that most people might know is land use or land use change in forestry, LULUCF, for those of you who can spell it out. We've just revised the regulation. I'm sure we'll touch upon it. And we're also responsible for the proposal currently under negotiation on the certification of carbon removals, very much linked with agriculture. And I'm happy to say that in all our regulation parts, we refer to use of Earth observation directly or indirectly. So very happy to be here and talk about that.
Let's talk online with Patrick. Patrick, could you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Fabio. So I'm Patrick Worms. I am a Senior Science Policy Advisor for C4ICRAF, which is an organization that is studying the role of trees in agricultural landscapes in the global tropics. We have about 700 staff, of which about 400 are scientists, scattered across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. I'm also Vice President of the European Agroforestry Federation, which has been lobbying and encouraging European stakeholders to adopt agroforestry and farming practices across the European Union, starting from the insight that while most farming is using chemistry, genetics, and mechanization to achieve its objectives, it is going to be more efficient, more resilient, and more productive if you add a fourth leg to that particular table, which is, of course, the leg of agroecosystems, understanding how ecosystems work and how farmers can harness the beneficial impacts of ecosystemic processes in their production systems. Thank you. Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm also president of the International Union of Agroforestry, which is a budding organization mostly responsible for convening once every 3 years the World Congresses on Agroforestry, and you're all invited to join us in Kigali, Rwanda in May 2025 to discuss this wonderful land use system. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Now, Andreas, again online, please, your introduction.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, everyone. And I'm happy to be here and thank you for the invitation. Yeah, my name is Andreas Steinhorst. I'm the Executive Secretary of EA. EA, the European Cooperation for Accreditation, is the Association of European National Accreditation Bodies. And we are appointed by the European Commission as a European accreditation infrastructure according to Regulation 765 on accreditation. Currently, we have 49 members from 49 countries. All of the national accreditation bodies must be appointed by their governments as a sole national accreditation body in its country. And what is important is that reports and certificates issued by, we call them conformity assessment bodies, and we will come back to that later, which is accredited by its national accreditation body, shall be recognized within the EU and EFTA by the national authorities. Currently, more than 100 EU legislations make use of accreditation and conformity assessment. One example in your linked area is the EU emission trading system, which includes as an essential pillar the mandatory accreditation of the verification bodies. What is our involvement in achieving carbon removal? According to the proposed regulation, Article 10, certification bodies appointed by certification schemes shall be accredited by a national accreditation authority pursuant to Regulation 765. And that is why I'm here and try to explain a little bit more about the accreditation and certification structure.
A very important role, of course. Now, Patrick, it's your turn.
Thanks, Fabio, and good morning to all here and online. So my name is Patrick Pagani. I'm working for Copa Cogeca, so representing the 22 million European farmers and 20,000 agri-cooperatives. So actually, we are those who will need to implement, well, our members are those who will need to implement this legislation. And it's really important that, thanks for inviting us, but it's really important also the message that was conveyed before by Agnieszka and the previous speaker, that we need to mix the ecosystems. It's good that we are here, and actually it's really important that you have put carbon farming as one of the topics of the Green Deal in your agenda. So it's a pleasure. From my side, I work on policy coordination, particularly on the Fit for 55 package, so climate package, and data and agriculture technology. So I can do the link between the climate side and the data elements, which are key, and we'll discuss later. Thanks.
Perfect. Very good. Okay, now let's start with some thematics. I would like first to address the thematics of certification, because for receiving certification, the criteria to be used must be compliant with the quality criteria. So I would like, Simon, that you provide a brief introduction about what are these quality criteria and which is the position of how the European Commission is planning to identify entities that can satisfy these quality criteria.
Okay, so thanks so much, Fabio. And I'll try to give a little bit of a rundown, because anybody who's looked at the certification proposal, you'll see a very creative use of the acronym quality. Not a surprise. We want to try to get that in people's minds. It's very important that the certification process leads to high quality of carbon removals. At the moment, there's a voluntary carbon market. There's a lot out. I read this morning that Meta has decided to buy 7 million tons, presumably, of carbon credits. But what is the quality? Where are they? How they're monitored? It's all very important. The devil is really in the details. So we set out really 4 criteria, if you like, that we think are the basis for anything that goes into a certificate. And the first is quantification. And clearly, it was already mentioned today that without being able to measure, where do we get? Not very far. So measurement is crucial. And we definitely think that remote sensing is a tool, Earth observation is a tool that is instrumental in that measurement process, that quantification process. So that's really the fundamental underlying basis. If we're not able to quantify, then we don't have really anything to certify. The second one to move on relatively fast is a term maybe you're not familiar, is additionality. It's a very much a climate type of term. And what it means is changing what is being done. So particularly with land, greenhouse gas is always in flux. It's either leaving the land, emitting, or it's being absorbed. It's a removal. So the additionality is changing that situation in a sense of mitigation. So it's also very important that the additionality components, now we're on to the A, of course, is able to be determined. It comes again from the quantification. The L part really is around long-term storage, long-term management of the area that is being certified. And that links again very much with everything to do with observation, because we want to be able to monitor that what is taking place is happening over a long time. And finally, the Y is sustainability, or the TY, I should say. And that is a lot to do with looking at the extra parameters around the work that is being certified. So we have a focus on carbon removals, but it's not only. It's what happens with the biodiversity aspect, what happens with the productivity. Are we, if we look at the broader picture, able to show that we have food security? Are we able to look at resilience? And these may be a softer parameters, but nevertheless, the sustainability in its larger sense, but definitely in also the environmental sense, is the key of that last component. So quantification, additionality, long-term storage monitoring, and the sustainability. That's really the focus. And I have to say from the beginning, we've always considered it's been crucial to have tools that are able to be comparable across large scales, large areas, I should say. And that's why we see Earth observation as playing a key role in pretty much all those elements.
Thank you, Simon. We will go later on the usage of Earth observation data for this. Patrick, online, EURAF is very active in the release of policy briefing that comments on regulation, proposal, initiative, and so on related to agroforestry. So concerning this proposal for the framework for certifying carbon removal, which are the comments from EURAF point of view? Would you like to highlight some and to underline some specific parts that maybe are okay or maybe amended or changed somehow?
Yes, I'm not a lobbyist specialized in these things. So what I'd like to do instead, if you allow, Fabio, is to pick up on what Simon was saying on the key questions of quantification, additionality, long-term or permanence, and sustainability, and the role that Earth observation can play in these systems. And I will use the experience that we have in the global south and the experience that we have in Europe to make some comments about that. Now, quantification is absolutely crucial, and that links to quality. And one of the key issues that we have with quality is that most quantification systems today are only able to measure what is happening above the soil level. It's relatively easy to use Earth observation to quantify the amount of carbon stuck in trees or in grasslands or in crops. It's much, much harder to use Earth observation to analyze what is happening at the level of the soil. And that brings us to a conundrum, because soil carbon is generally of higher quality than above ground carbon, since above ground carbon can be cut or it can be burned. Below ground carbon takes longer to get back into the atmosphere. So it addresses permanence as well. And there, I think what is most interesting is to understand how the constant improvement in the quality of the data that Earth observation can give us reduces the pressure on us to use older systems of getting data, such as soil carroting, spectroscopic analysis, etc., because we now have the ability to use the data that we analyze from soil samples to inform machine learning algorithms that can use the increased quality data coming from Earth observation in order to give us increasingly accurate pictures of what is going on. To take the last point that Simon was making, the sustainability, the extra parameters, these from our perspective are at least as important as the carbon parameters. I'm sure that our colleague from Copa-Cogeca will agree. Farmers are interested in productivity, they're interested in resilience, because productivity and resilience transform into profit and loss. And a farm is a business like any other. It needs to make a profit in order to stay above water. From that context, being able to measure what is happening both above ground and below ground is absolutely crucial, because you always come up with with results that point in the same direction, that adding complexity to the farming landscape is likely to deliver on these various items of interest to both farmers and the public sector. So it is a beautiful and a rather wonderful insight that when it comes to the management of landscapes, the things that you need to do in order to mitigate climate change by capturing more carbon and putting it in plants and the soil are usually also pretty good in terms of adapting to climate change, because they give you more resilience and they buffer extreme climate events that farms might be exposed to. Now, quantifying that and rewarding farmers for the right procedures is something that is extraordinarily hard to do without increasingly affordable and increasingly frequent Earth observation images. Just to take the example of what we do in Africa, which probably today has the most accurate soil carbon measurement system in the planet, that is simply due to the fact that we have been accumulating soil samples for about 40 years, and we've been reanalyzing them and using them to train machine learning algorithms. But at the same time, we now have access to increasing amounts of increasingly cheap and increasingly detailed remote sensing imagery, which turbocharges the analytical processes we can use there. So with that, Fabio, I am very keenly aware that I have not answered your question at all, but I hope the contribution was interesting anyway. Thank you.
But you provided very important information. Thank you, Patrick. Okay. Andreas online now, always about certification. The regulation sets up specific requirements for the certification. And the goal, of course, is to have methodology that are as much as possible transparent, as much as possible objective, in order also to build the trust of the people in what is measured. So, what is the role of the accreditation bodies in this context? How you can guarantee this kind of information, solid information, reliable information?
Yeah, thank you. It's not that easy. So, because I guess that not many people are that familiar with accreditation, but I will try to explain the context. As already mentioned, a certification body providing certification services under the proposed regulation on carbon removal shall be accredited. But now the first question could be, what is accreditation? And here we can take a look to Regulation 765 on accreditation, which defines accreditation as an attestation by a national accreditation body that a conformity assessment body meets the requirements set by harmonized standard and, where applicable, any additional requirements, including those set out in relevant sectorial schemes to carry out a specific conformity assessment activity. And such a conformity assessment activity can be the certification. The accreditation of a certification body or of a conformity assessment body, and one example of them is a certification body, is performed by the national accreditation body. Pursuant to Regulation 765, the CAP shall apply for accreditation to its national accreditation body. So they cannot choose any other accreditation body. So there's no competition between the national accreditation bodies because they are acting as public authorities. But of course, the certification bodies itself, they can offer their services throughout Europe and globally. More specific here in this context, in the accreditation process, a CAP shall demonstrate that it meets the requirements of the applicable standard. I mentioned it, and we have here presumably two appropriate standards which can take into account, that is two international standards, 17065 and 17029, but I will not bother you with these details. But these standards define the requirements regarding competence and impartiality. But then this certification body have also to demonstrate that they meeting the requirements set out in the regulation itself and in the relevant certification scheme. So that will be assessed by the national accreditation body. The national accreditation body, they are offering all kind of accreditations for any type of conformity assessment activities. So we can look at certification, but I already mentioned the emission trading system, where we have verification bodies involved. The accreditation process itself includes the application and the assessment of the certification bodies, the decision-making and the survey and the regular assessment, so that you can have a permanent confidence in the competence of the accredited certification bodies. No third party, neither public nor private, can influence the accreditation process. It is the sole responsibility of the national accreditation body. But nevertheless, it is important for the national accreditation bodies to cooperate with of course, with the authorities, but also with any other stakeholders, especially if it comes to having experts who shall be part of the assessment of the certification bodies. So you can see it's a very, very structured system. It's a transparent system based on international standard, but it will cover all the requirements set out in the proposed regulation, and that will be crucial in the different certification schemes.
Okay, thank you, Andreas. Patrick, let's talk about farmers. There will be, of course, the primary actor for this certification. How do you think that this certification carbon removal will be accepted by the farmer? It will be a duty that they will have to respect, or it will be a chance for improving their business, the sustainability, and the quality of what they do?
Thanks. First, a bit of, as Agnieszka would say, a bit of blah blah, because we are in a different ecosystem, or as a farming community, and coming in a new ecosystem. It would be good also to give you a few words of what is the situation of farming in Europe and the world. But one element is clearly that, as for society, these last 3 years were not business as usual, in the sense we all experienced COVID, we all experienced the consequence on our life of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, with inflation, energy. And actually, in this respect, one element, farmers and also the food chain were continuing producing food, particularly under COVID, where we were all stuck at home, and farmers were out and producing. And so this is an important element of that farming are resilient, adapting to the external context, and they're doing it on the daily. Particularly in last year, we had an increase of cost of energy, as also in our households, increase of prices of commodities at a certain point. In all this respect, so farmers had to adapt, and we're ready to adapt and to deliver food to the world. What we had also, and it's coming evident in the last months even more, it's extreme climate events. So last summer we had hails and heat waves. Now we experience dramatic floods in Italy, we know very well, and drought in Spain, for example. And here, the message that we have for our members is that Earth observation, so satellite, is one of the tools now that is monitoring what is happening to agriculture, also after the dramatic floods in Emilia-Romagna, or the drought in Spain. So you see already there are connections that come in to react to emergency, but you see that there are synergy that is important to develop. So this is the first message. Farmers and foresters are the first to feel the consequence of climate change. So it's evident. And so we see, to reply to your question, strong, immense opportunity coming from carbon farming. Among all these proposals on the Green Deal, we are looking for enablers, so how to increase our remuneration of farmers, because, as was mentioned before, if we can't be in the business, farmers drop their activity. So it's as your companies. So if carbon farming also and remuneration of removals can be a way to increase the remuneration of farmers, but also contributing to reduce, contribute to the climate, so reduce the emissions and use better practices. So it's an opportunity. So farmers, in principle, would see it as an opportunity. The issue is that also we are talking of a system that was the first time in the EU legislation in the Farm to Fork proposal, so, or Green Deal, okay, so 2009 to 2020. So there are many projects ongoing, but we see that we need a lot of time, and particularly to build a market for this system. So there are many uncertainties also in the proposal. There are many references to delegated acts. It's a long, way to go, but the bases are there for an opportunity. So farmers can see an opportunity. It's very complicated, to speak frankly, to go to farmers and explain how they will put it in practice. So I think also starting discussing now and also this topic, and well, the certification bodies will be key. The role of agri-cooperatives will be key, because farmers alone see it very difficult, basically, to be. But if agri-cooperatives have a role in this discussion, have a role in putting together a group of operators that can, provide advice to the farmers, and in case participate in certification, if at least support. So it can be an important opportunity. And, but really, it's, as private forest owners, farmers, we welcome the possibility to store carbon in soil and biomass, but also we contribute to bioeconomy. So we are there. It needs to be worked on the methodology on certification. This will be key. I understand, but maybe Simon can also complement. There is an expert group which is working specifically on certification, and so there will be seen also how, in case earth observation can be put in the picture, could be a point. But also there, earth observation is an additional tool to monitor health and monitor eventually, if possible, so to go in understand the sequestration of the carbon in the soil. Is, as also the previous speaker was mentioning, it's a tool. Also, from your side, what are your views? What is possible? Okay. Would be interesting. Thanks.
Thank you, Patrick. Simon, going back to talk about Earth observation data, satellite. How do you think to use Earth observation data for monitoring, reporting, and verify the carbon removal? Which is your opinion? How do you feel comfortable with the measurement that today can be done with Earth observation? We know that there are some level of uncertainty depending on what we are going to measure.
Okay, so first I should make a little, what's the word? It's not exactly a disclaimer. That's the opposite. Because 30-something years ago, I was a remote sensing student, and I must say that I would have dreamt to be in the situation we're in today with the data that is literally, so far as from my perspective, we are floating in a sea of data. And yeah, I mean, I started off by, for my PhD, looking at how to monitor agriculture with remote sensing. I seem to remember that I had real problems to get satellite data. I ended up using airborne to give you just a little feel of it. But things have moved incredibly, and I think that we now have a very positive image of what can be actually utilized through remote sensing. Again, you might have seen that I was heavily involved at JRC with the Mars program with using satellite imagery for the Common Agricultural Policy. So I'm very much very, very confident that we have some extremely good tools in our hands now, and even some that will emerge, but I'm not waiting for those that arrive. So to split into two emphasis points, if you like. One is the LULUCF regulation, and one's been revised now, where we've accentuated, and this is focused on the member states, so the member state targets for carbon removal, and how they should monitor what takes place over their territories. So from that perspective, the advantage of Earth observation, particularly satellite, is the synoptic view. It's the time series, the fact that we can build a record of where things are going, the additionality element, and that just a hint for all the companies here is this is new in climate, especially related to European climate policy. And so you need to take up that dialogue with the government agencies involved, who are now beginning to realize what a task that they have ahead of them. They have to invest in climate, and therefore the element related to monitoring and that of Earth observation should be part of that investment. But on the certification side, now here, the objective, I wouldn't say the target, but certainly the actor is there, the land manager. It might be a farmer, it might be a forester, it might be some land manager of a different sort. But there, it's about being able to provide to the point information in a timely manner, in a cost-effective manner. And again, we very much feel that the tools are there. It'll be a mix of Earth observation. Some will be probably more detailed, end up being airborne or even drone-based, we don't know. As we mentioned, that we have this expert group that actually meets next week, where we're starting to develop the methodologies. So the methodologies will be proposed by the Commission, assessed by this expert group. It's quite a multidisciplinary team, and then indeed put together in a delegated act. But we're already well ahead of schedule because we started that expert group in parallel to the co-legislation of the proposal itself. So we need a basic act, and then they get delegated acts. But the idea is that the delegated acts will give, if you like, the technological reference point of how things are to be carried out, which are then to be, of course, checked by the accreditation bodies. That's part of the whole schema, if you like. So we're very confident that we have a suite of tools, that the tools will be different depending on where we are, who it focuses on. Is it national level? Is it an individual farm? Is it a forest application? Is it an agroforestry application? Is it a soil application? Is it a geological storage application? So there will be different types of tools needed, but we certainly believe that we have many, many solutions out there that are viable, and plenty of companies with innovation to be supported, of course, on how to develop that little extra few meters more to get to the point. So a very, very dynamic few years ahead of us.
Okay, thank you. We are a little bit short of time. We have a few minutes left. I just want to have some words from Patrick about the usage of Earth observation for agroforestry for this purpose.
Thanks, Fabio. What Simon said is absolutely crucial here. We now have tools at our disposal that go beyond the wildest dreams that we both had at the time when we were doing our education. And however, these tools cannot be enough to actually measure what's accurately going on in the landscapes. One thing that soil science has shown over the last 10 years is how dynamic soils are, and how nutrients, gases, and minerals and biology change in the soil depending on what is happening above the soil and how it is being treated. And understanding how that works and understanding what impact that has on issues like carbon removals is something that cannot be done by Earth observation alone. It needs to be done in conjunction with soil analysis. And Simon referred to a meeting that's happening next week where this will be unpacked in more detail. But just to give a very brief summary, you need to be able to give the models that you are using data to work on, and part of that data is remote sensing. But another part of that data is data that you've analyzed using more traditional methods from soil samples. And there we find ourselves in a bit of a paradox. In rich countries like the US or Europe, many soil samples, most soil analysis is done at the level of individual farmers who can afford to pay for it. So there's very little aggregated data on soil samples at national or supranational level. In poorer environments like South Asia or Africa, farmers cannot afford to do this kind of soil analysis. So there's more centralized institutions that do it. So paradoxically, we tend to have better data from soil samples in those environments than we do in Europe. And so for me, perhaps the most interesting conversation that can take place in the following days, weeks, and months is to understand how the learnings that have been acquired on using remote sensing to get relatively accurate soil carbon data in environments like Africa and South Asia can be applied to the very different environments, very different social, political, as well as biological and ecological environments of Europe and North America. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Andreas, just a word from your side about Earth observation data. Do you think that they can be part of the certification process? The credibility that they have must be verified in which measure for being part of the certification process?
Oh, it's a difficult question for me. So first, let me say that it will be important to have appropriate certification schemes. So I think that will be crucial. And here we have to ensure that the certification schemes, the certification requirements are not in contradiction to the accreditation standards and the accreditation rules. But that is something what we can try to support. One key element, of course, is if we're talking about certification of carbon removal, is to have reliable data. That was already emphasized by my colleagues in this panel. And for that, we need reliable and accurate data. And I'm not an expert in remote sensing, but I could imagine that will be one of the key tools, not only directly as part of the certification schemes, but at least in terms of monitoring and reporting of carbon removals. But as mentioned, important will be to have the appropriate certification schemes.
Okay, thank you, Andreas. To comments from your side, just 1 minute, we are short of time.
Thanks. No, the main message that farmers need to have the tools to make the proper decisions. Also regarding carbon removals and reduction of emissions. So that's very important for farmers to know what their activity will bring in terms of carbon removals or reduction of emissions. So data are key in all this debate, and Earth observation can provide an additional contribution. Then there is all the issue on who owns the data and how to use the data, and so it's an important element. From your industry, one of the ideal world, farmers would be able, with their mobile device, to, while they go on a tractor and they do their sow, to have data on how much they will earn on carbon reduction of the emissions or sequestration of carbon. So this would be an ideal world so that they can continue to produce, but on the other side, earn also from a market-based carbon removal system. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. With Patrick, I would like to close this session. We are just 5 minutes later, but we start 5 minutes after, so we are in time, I say. Okay. I thank you very much, all of you, all Patrick and Andreas online. Thank you.
Thank you.